works of art that I put together is a collection that really is an outgrowth of a struggle that I had in life, and I needed to express it through my creative outlet, which was art. And I'll go through a little bit of my struggle and what prompted these pieces. And then we can talk about any of the pieces that that you like to talk about or have a question about or bothers you. But each of the pieces have a story behind them. They have a struggle that I went through in trying to understand the Holocaust, evil in general. And my connection to it is that my father is a survivor, and he was in Auschwitz. And he was one of the survivors that spoke about the Holocaust. A lot of them don't speak about it and didn't want to burden the next generation with it. My father spoke about it whenever we asked him. My brother and I would ask him what he went through, and he would tell us. And the stories were not pleasant, but I didn't think they were traumatizing in any way. I didn't think that it was it tainted my childhood or my upbringing. And the stories by themselves may not have been the problem. What for me became a problem was that my father before the war was religious and God-fearing, and after the war he was no longer religious, but he was God-fearing. And for me, there became the struggle. In hearing these stories of what he went through and how evil the world can be, and still hearing from the same person that there is a good God that runs the world, that was a little difficult for a child to accept, and even as an adult, it's something difficult to grasp. And it's something that became progressively more difficult for me as I was raised traditionally. I was raised to believe in God, but not to be observant. And then I started to take on the religion more. And in doing so, my difficulties only got compounded because I had, concentration camps on the one hand, God on the other, and now I had a religion that was supposed to make all that fit. It's one thing when you don't have that and they don't make sense. But here I was supposed to have some continuum that's supposed to go and bridge this huge gap, and it wasn't for me. The pieces turned out, in hindsight, to be along three categories, basically, the three main categories. And the first one, I'll discuss each one. The first one is just how to approach the Holocaust. How are we supposed to look at it? What I was seeing in a lot of the literature and a lot of the stories, and however anybody would give over the Holocaust was, especially when it comes to religion, is dealing with the bright side, trying to say, there's a number of miracles, and you got to look at this miracle and that miracle, and how all this was incredible. And for me, that really wasn't what the Holocaust was about. And it's something that I had to try to understand how to look at it. That's the first theme, and I'll discuss that in a couple of pieces. The second theme was really what was bothering me, which is the religion aspect, and looking at this component of concentration camps and God, and how, if I believe in this religion, I believe in a God, how this all fits together. So what I wanted to do was go back to the Bible itself. I didn't want to go into answers that people can sort of make fit. You'll see from the first piece I talk about, that's one of the approaches I started with, but it wasn't satisfying. I wanted to go back to the Bible itself. And in Judaism, the Bible is supposed to be the blueprint for the world. Now, if something is in the world, it makes sense that it would be in that blueprint. So I wanted to look at the Bible and say, where is it that there's this dispensation for something like a concentration camp and gas chambers and evil in general. So that was my goal, and a lot of the pieces, most of the pieces, I think, reflect that aspect. And then the third that I'll express is was really a surprise to me. It was really what we're supposed to do now. What comes now? What do we do? There's a Holocaust. How are we supposed to move forward from that? So the first theme, this idea of how to look at the Holocaust, I'll illustrate it through this is the first piece that I put together. And initially it was just the center frame. There wasn't three images of the boy, it was just the middle one. And my idea was that here's in my naivete, I decided I have a little bit of an answer. Maybe the problem, and before I get started, I should make sure that that's not the case. Maybe the problem is that we're looking just at the nightmare, and that's not fair. It's not fair to say how can there be a God when there's such a nightmare? There's a lot more to life than just that one point. So what I tried to illustrate with this was that when the pinwheel is frozen in time, and if we look at just that one episode, the Holocaust, then the ominous shadow is on the boy's face of a swastika cast by the stopped pinwheel. And the idea would be then that when you look at it, well, what happens when the pinwheel starts up? When time comes into play, when you take the whole history of the world into play, and then the Holocaust is a piece of that, does that sort of even things out? Does that make it a little bit different? Maybe it's important to look at everything. But when I finished that piece, it wasn't satisfying. It didn't speak to me. And I had to end up rendering the 3 panels. And the first one being before the war, where the pinwheel is going, and all that time before the war, and it's just casting a cool breeze on the boy's face, a shadow, but not the ominous one. And then during the war, there's the horror where it's on the boy's face. But even after, when time picks up again and we've gone past the war, I still had to render the swastika on the boy's face. The shadow still is there. That, to me, was really more of the issue. I don't know, you could say it in a nice way that, you have to look at the big picture. But if I can't personally think of a picture big enough to hold a Holocaust and make it all okay, then it's not going to work for me. It's not going to do anything for me. So right away I realized, trying to find shortcuts, trying to find nice answers that equations to make things work wasn't going to do it for me. This is a very interesting one, the idea of this covenant. And when Abraham enters in this covenant, Abraham's a good guy and God likes him, so God says he's going to make his people the chosen people. But Abraham realizes that it's possible that his children won't live up to the level that God wants, and that in the future they will have, they won't live up to it, and they'll fall short. And while the going is good, he wants to secure this covenant with God, that God will not forsake his people, no matter what happens, no matter how bad they get. And the rabbis say that that as I told you, it's very cryptic, but it gets darker and darker, the scene. The sun sets, and then it gets dark, and then the sun seems to set again, and it gets even pitch dark. So he's in this terrible situation where he's getting more and more terrified. And the rabbis say that God is showing Abraham all the different exiles that we will go through. And it just gets worse and worse. And Abraham this is exactly why he wanted to enter this covenant, because there's no possible way, with all this exile and all this evil that can happen, for him to be able to expect that his children will live up to the covenant. So he asks God to promise him no matter what. And then at the end of the covenant, when it's just as pitch dark as can be and he's terrified, he sees an apparition. And he sees this lit torch and a smoking oven. And this type of an image doesn't really come up again anywhere else. They connect it a little bit to when we received the Torah at Har Sinai, but it's very loose and it's difficult just because there was fire there and torches. So we don't really know. It's very unclear what that really means. And I'm not saying this is what it meant, that this is what he saw, but it's, in theory, the idea, I think, is powerful. If you think about a gas chamber and you want to describe it and you call it a smoking oven, that seems to be pretty accurate. And so what I rendered here was the gas chamber, and the chimney stacks represented this lit torch. So you have the fire and you have the gas. And the two combine here, up here, to form the word Breshit, which is the first word in the Bible. And they say that this word alludes to this covenant because it's such an important covenant. So the way that it works is that the gas forms the words bris, which is covenant, and then the fire forms the word esh, which is fire. This fire covenant is hinted to at this first word in the Bible, and it's a pivotal point in history. What I see Abraham seeing in this covenant, what made him feel like the covenant was ratified, because it just ends with that. It ends with him seeing this. He's horrified, terrified, everything's going on, and then he sees this apparition, and it's all over, and there's no explanation. For me, if we look at it, and we see that if this is a progression of all the exiles, and this is the last one, and what he sees is what we've seen, which is the gas chambers, and he sees his great-great-great-granddaughters go into these gas chambers with their children and have to pacify them and still have ani mamin on their lips, saying that they believe. So here I render the words anachnu ma'aminim from inside the gas chamber, that his future generations are going to have that type of strength and that ability. They don't need any kind of covenant from God, any promise from God that he's not going to, get rid of the covenant, that he's going to stick with us no matter what. Abraham's children are incredible. This is what we're talking about. We've gone through this, and we can go into this gas chamber saying, anachnu ma'aminim, that we believe in God still. Abraham has nothing to worry about. Right? The Jewish people are an incredible lot on their own, without God promising, no matter what, and I know that you won't deserve it or anything, I'll keep it. This is what he sees. To me, that is what makes him feel better.